The blood trailed behind Zara Hart like crimson teardrops in the dust as she stumbled through the barren Nevada landscape, her body aching from the blows her father and brothers had rained upon her just hours before. The year was 1878, and being 19 and unwed with child in Hawthorne was apparently a sin worthy of near death. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she clutched her swollen abdomen, silently promising her unborn child that somehow they would survive this. The dizziness was becoming overwhelming. Each step required more effort than the last, and the rocky terrain blurred before her eyes. Zara's dress, once a pretty calico her mother had sewn before consumption took her 3 winters past, was now torn and stained with evidence of her family's rage. The memory of their faces, contorted with fury when she'd finally gathered the courage to tell them about the baby, made her flinch even now. Her father's Bible-quoting condemnation, her eldest brother Joseph's belt, the shame in her younger sister's eyes as they were ordered from the room. "You're no daughter of mine," her father had spat. "Get out and take your sin with you." Zara stumbled, her knees finally giving way beneath her. The ground rushed up to meet her, and she barely managed to twist her body to protect her belly as she fell. The pain was immediate and consuming, radiating from her ribs where Joseph's boot had connected repeatedly. She closed her eyes against the harsh sunlight, wondering if this desolate stretch of Nevada dirt would be where both her life and her child's would end. The rhythmic sound of hoofbeats seemed distant at first, almost dreamlike. Zara forced her swollen eyes open, squinting at the approaching figure. A rider, silhouetted against the late afternoon sun, was coming her way. She tried to call out, but her parched throat produced only a feeble rasp. The rider slowed, then stopped altogether. "Good Lord," a deep voice exclaimed. Footsteps approached rapidly. Miss, can you hear me?" Zara felt gentle hands turn her over, and she found herself looking into the most concerned pair of blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man's face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw darkened with stubble and sun-weathered skin. "Help," she managed to whisper. "Please. My baby." The stranger's expression shifted from concern to anger as he took in her condition, the bruises forming on her face, her torn dress, the blood on her legs. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his duster and wrapped it around her. "I'm Xavier James," he said, his voice steady and calm despite the fury evident in his eyes. "I've got a place about 3 miles from here." "Can you tell me your name, miss?" Zara Hart," she whispered, wincing as he carefully lifted her. "Well, Miss Hart, I promise you're safe now," Xavier said firmly as he settled her on his horse before mounting behind her. "Whatever happened, whoever did this, they won't touch you again." As the horse set off at a gentle pace, Zara allowed herself to lean back against the stranger's solid chest. His arms formed a protective circle around her as he held the reins. Despite everything, despite the pain and fear and uncertainty, something inside her recognized the truth in his words. For the first time in hours, Zara dared to hope. Xavier James had spent most of his 26 years learning to read signs, weather patterns, animal tracks, a man's intentions in his eyes. But nothing had prepared him for finding a beaten pregnant woman on his way back from town. The girl in his arms was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow but steady. Each moan that escaped her lips when his horse traversed rougher ground twisted something in his chest. His cabin came into view as they crested a small rise, a sturdy 2-room structure with a corral and small barn nearby. It wasn't much, but it was clean and warm, and right now that was what the girl needed. "We're here, Miss Hart," he said, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Xavier dismounted carefully, keeping one hand on Zara to ensure she didn't fall. Then he gently lifted her from the saddle. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, a fact that concerned him almost as much as her injuries. He kicked open the door of his cabin and carried her to his bed, laying her down as gently as possible. In the better light of the cabin, her injuries looked even worse. Her face was swollen, one eye nearly shut, and dried blood caked her hairline. The rest of her was hidden by his duster and her torn dress, but Xavier suspected the damage continued beneath. "Miss Hart? Zara?" he tried, relieved when her eyes fluttered open. "I need to ride for the doctor. Will you be all right alone for about an hour?" Fear flashed across her battered face. No, no, doctor. They'll tell. My father will find me. Xavier frowned. Your father? Was he the one who— He couldn't finish the sentence, the rage building in him making it difficult to keep his voice steady. A tear slid down Zara's cheek. Him. My brothers. When they found out about. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. Understanding dawned, cold and clear. Xavier had seen this before, families casting out daughters who had fallen, though never with such violence. His jaw clenched. All right, no doctor for now, he conceded. But I need to clean your wounds. My mother was a midwife. I know a little about tending to injuries and childbirth. Zara nodded weakly, and Xavier set to work. He gathered clean cloths, his precious store of witch hazel, and a basin of water. With a gentleness that belied his calloused hands, he began cleaning the blood from her face. This might sting, he warned before dabbing at a cut on her cheekbone. Zara barely flinched. It's nothing compared to before. Xavier worked in silence for a while, his mind racing. This girl couldn't be more than 19 or 20, carrying a child, and now without family or home. The decent thing would be to help her get to a larger town, perhaps Carson City, where there might be charity for women in her situation. But something about her caught at him, her quiet dignity despite her circumstances, the protective way she curved her body around her unborn child even in sleep. How far along are you? He asked softly as he finished cleaning her face. Almost 6 months, she whispered. The father was a traveler passing through Hawthorne. He promised to come back for me, but— She trailed off, the old pain evident beneath the new. Xavier nodded, understanding the unspoken. You need rest. I'll make up a pallet for myself by the fire. I can't take your bed, Zara protested weakly. You're not taking it. I'm offering it, Xavier replied with a gentle firmness that brooked no argument. Rest now. We'll figure things out in the morning. As he turned to leave, her hand shot out with surprising strength, catching his wrist. Thank you, she said, her eyes holding his. Not everyone would have stopped. Xavier felt something shift inside him, a recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit. Anyone worth their salt would have done the same, he said, though he knew it wasn't true. He'd seen enough of human cruelty to know better. After ensuring Zara was as comfortable as possible, Xavier stepped outside to tend to his horse. The animal nickered softly as he approached. What do you think, Samson? He murmured as he removed the saddle. Seems we've got ourselves a guest. The horse bumped Xavier's shoulder with his nose, as if in agreement. As he worked, Xavier considered his options. He had enough food stored to last 2 people through winter if needed. His small cattle operation mostly ran itself, with occasional help from the Washoe men from the nearby reservation who he'd befriended and traded with fairly, unlike many in these parts. It wasn't ideal, a single man housing an unmarried pregnant woman, but Xavier had never much cared for society's rules. Not since the war had taken his brother and left him with scars both visible and hidden. Not since he'd ridden west to escape the ghosts that haunted Virginia. By the time he returned to the cabin, Zara had fallen into an uneasy sleep. Xavier added wood to the fire, then spread his bedroll on the floor nearby. As the flames cast dancing shadows across the walls, he found himself watching the rise and fall of Zara's chest, reassuring himself that she still breathed. Whatever came next would be complicated, but one thing was certain: Xavier James wasn't the kind of man who could find a wounded bird and not try to heal its wing. And Zara Hart, despite her fragile appearance, struck him as someone with the potential to soar again, given half a chance. Morning came with tentative fingers of light through the cabin's small windows. Zara woke disoriented, the unfamiliar ceiling above her causing a moment of panic before the events of the previous day came flooding back. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, gasping as pain lanced through her ribs. Easy there, came a voice from across the room. Xavier was already up, standing by a small stove where something that smelled like coffee was brewing. His hair, dark as a raven's wing, was slightly mussed from sleep, and he'd clearly just washed up. His face was damp, and a few droplets of water clung to his rolled-up shirt sleeves. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pouring a cup of coffee before approaching the bed. "Like I've been trampled by cattle," Zara admitted, managing to prop herself up more slowly this time. "But alive, thanks to you." Xavier handed her the cup. "Drink this. It's strong, but it'll help. The coffee was indeed powerful, but the warmth and bitterness were comforting in their own way. As Zara sipped, she took the opportunity to truly look at her rescuer in the daylight. Xavier James was tall and broad-shouldered, with the lean, muscular build of a man who worked with his hands. His face was handsome in a rugged way, high cheekbones, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and those striking blue eyes that seemed to see more than most. A scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into his collar. "I've got eggs," he said, returning to the stove. "You should eat." "Thank you," Zara said, then hesitated. "Mr. James, I can't stay here. I don't want to bring trouble to your door." Xavier cracked eggs into a pan before looking back at her. "First, it's just Xavier. Second, you're in no condition to go anywhere yet. And third," his voice hardened slightly, "if anyone comes looking to cause more harm, they'll find I'm not an easy man to trouble." There was something in his tone that made Zara believe him completely. This was a man accustomed to standing his ground. "Now," he continued, his voice softening, "do you want to tell me more about what happened? Only if you're ready." Zara looked down at her coffee, watching the dark liquid ripple with her slightly shaking hands. "I told my family about the baby yesterday morning. I'd been hiding it as best I could, but—" She gestured to her rounded belly. "It was getting harder." Xavier nodded, flipping the eggs with practiced ease. "My father. He's the preacher in Hawthorne. Very respected. Very strict." Zara's voice grew distant. "When my mother was alive, she softened his edges. Since she died, he's grown harder. More righteous, he calls it." She took another sip of coffee, gathering strength. "When I told them, it was like something broke in him. He said I'd brought sin into his house, that I was dead to him now. My brothers Joseph and Matthew. They follow him in everything. Joseph started first with his belt, then his fists." Xavier's knuckles whitened around the spatula he was holding. I think they meant to beat the sin out of me," Zara whispered. "Or maybe the baby. I don't know. I managed to run when Matthew went to get water. I just ran and kept running." Xavier brought over a plate of eggs and set it beside her. "Eat," he said gently. "For the baby, if not for yourself." Zara nodded, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. As she ate, Xavier sat in a chair nearby, his own breakfast untouched. "Your father and brothers," he said carefully. "Will they come looking for you?" Zara shook her head. "I doubt it. Father made it clear I was no longer his daughter. In his eyes, I'm already dead. The shame I brought on the family name is what matters to him, not my welfare." Something dark passed over Xavier's face. "Some men don't deserve to be called father," he said quietly, and Zara sensed there was a story behind those words. "What will you do now?" he asked after a moment. It was the question Zara had been avoiding since the moment she'd discovered her condition. Before yesterday, she'd harbored a foolish hope that her family might eventually accept her and the baby. "Now, I don't know," she admitted. "I have no money, no skills beyond keeping house and basic schooling. I was counting eggs and measuring flour while other girls were learning trades." "You can stay here," Xavier said simply. "At least until you've recovered and the baby comes." Zara stared at him, searching for any hidden meaning in his offer. "People will talk. A single woman living with a man not her husband." Xavier actually chuckled at that. "Miss Hart, my nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. The town gossips have long since written me off as a lost cause, the strange Easterner who trades fairly with Indians and keeps to himself. Your reputation can hardly be damaged more than it already is, and mine isn't worth worrying about." "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Zara asked, genuinely puzzled. Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the cabin walls. "During the war," he finally said, "I was wounded at Gettysburg, left for dead on the field. A farm woman found me, dragged me to her barn, and nursed me back to health for 3 weeks. Union soldier in Confederate territory. She risked everything to help a stranger." He looked back at Zara, his eyes clear and direct. "When I asked her why, she said, because next time, it might be my boy needing help far from home. I promised myself I'd pass on that kindness if I ever had the chance." Zara felt tears prickling at her eyes, not from pain this time, but from the unexpected gift of compassion when she'd expected only judgment and hardship. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you," she said softly. "Not asking for repayment," Xavier replied. finally starting on his own breakfast. Just offering safe harbor until you're ready to sail on, if that's what you choose. For the first time in months, Zara felt a weight lifting. Not completely, her situation was still desperate by any measure, but the immediate terror had receded. Here, in this simple cabin with this quiet, steady man, she might just find the strength to face whatever came next. "Thank you," she said. "I accept your offer, at least until I'm recovered." Xavier nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Then welcome to Twisted Pine Ranch, Miss Hart. It's not much, but it's peaceful." "Please," she said, returning his smile despite her swollen face. "Call me Zara." The next few days established a cautious routine. Xavier helped Zara to the table for meals, changed the dressings on her worst cuts, and otherwise gave her as much privacy as the small cabin allowed. He spent most daylight hours outside, tending to his small herd of cattle, mending fences, or hunting, returning with rabbits or the occasional deer to supplement their meals. Zara's strength returned gradually. By the fourth day, she was able to move around the cabin unassisted, though her ribs still ached fiercely. She began to feel restless, uncomfortable with being only a burden. On the morning of the fifth day, Xavier entered the cabin to find Zara at the stove, awkwardly trying to make breakfast while favoring her injured side. "What are you doing?" he asked, setting down the firewood he'd brought in. "Earning my keep," Zara replied firmly. "I may be injured, but I'm not helpless." Xavier looked like he wanted to object, but thought better of it. "At least let me help. Those ribs won't heal if you keep straining them." Together they prepared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush with honey and dried apples. As they ate, Zara studied Xavier surreptitiously. Despite their close quarters, he remained something of a mystery. He spoke little of himself, though she'd gathered he was from Virginia originally and had fought for the Union during the war. He read voraciously. Books were stacked everywhere in the cabin, from Shakespeare to scientific journals. And he treated her with unfailing respect, never once making her feel uncomfortable despite their unusual circumstances. "I need to ride into town today for supplies," Xavier said, breaking into her thoughts. "Will you be all right alone for a few hours?" Zara nodded. "Of course." "Is Hawthorne the closest town?" "No," Xavier replied, understanding her concern. "I trade in Silver Springs. It's smaller than Hawthorne, but has what we need. Your family won't be there." Relief washed over her. "Is there anything specific you need me to do while you're gone?" Xavier considered this. "Nothing that can't wait until you're healed. Just rest." After he left, Zara found herself restlessly exploring the cabin. It was simple but well built, with the main room serving as kitchen, dining area, and Xavier's sleeping space now that she occupied the small bedroom. Everything was neat but distinctly masculine, with practical furnishings built for durability rather than beauty. On a shelf near Xavier's bedroll, Zara discovered a small wooden box. She hesitated, knowing she shouldn't pry, but curiosity got the better of her. Inside was a daguerreotype of a young man in a Union uniform, his resemblance to Xavier unmistakable, though his expression was lighter, more carefree. Beside it lay a folded letter and a tarnished silver pocket watch. Zara quickly closed the box, feeling like an intruder into Xavier's private grief. She moved instead to the window, gazing out at the land surrounding the cabin. Twisted Pine Ranch was aptly named. A gnarled, old pine stood sentinel near the house, its trunk bent at an improbable angle, as if bowing to some unseen force. Beyond stretched grassland dotted with sagebrush, rising eventually to foothills and mountains in the distance. It was beautiful in a stark, honest way. Her hand went to her stomach as the baby kicked vigorously. "I know," she murmured. "It's nothing like Hawthorne, is it? But maybe that's good." Zara spent the rest of the day tidying what she could without overexerting herself and preparing a stew with the vegetables and meat Xavier had left. By the time she heard hoofbeats announcing his return, the cabin was filled with the rich aroma of cooking food. Xavier entered with an armful of packages, looking surprised at the domestic scene that greeted him. "You didn't have to cook," he said, setting down his burdens. "I wanted to," Zara replied simply. "It helps to feel useful." Something shifted in Xavier's expression, a softening around the eyes. "It smells wonderful." He began unpacking his supplies: flour, coffee, sugar, and other staples. Then, somewhat hesitantly, He withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I got something for you," he said, holding it out. "Thought you might need it." Curious, Zara unwrapped the package to find a length of soft blue fabric and a paper of pins. "For," she began, understanding dawning. "For the baby," Xavier confirmed, looking slightly uncomfortable. "The shopkeeper's wife helped me choose it. Said you could make whatever was needed." Zara ran her fingers over the fabric, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is perfect." Their eyes met for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Xavier cleared his throat and turned away first, busying himself with storing the supplies. "There's something else," he said after a moment, his back still to her. "News from Hawthorne. I overheard some travelers talking." Zara tensed. "My family." Xavier turned back to face her, his expression grave. "They're telling people you ran off with a traveling salesman, that you left a note confessing your sin and asking not to be followed." "A lie," Zara said, anger flaring. "To save their reputation." "Yes," Xavier agreed. "But it means they won't be searching for you." Relief and bitterness warred within her. Zara had expected nothing better, yet the confirmation of her family's complete rejection still stung. "At least the baby and I will be safe," she said finally. Xavier nodded, then hesitated before adding, "There's one more thing. I got you this." He held out a small bottle of witch hazel. "For your bruises. And this." A bar of lavender soap followed. "Thought you might. I mean, a woman would want." He was stumbling over his words now, a faint color rising in his tanned cheeks. Zara found it endearing. This capable man suddenly awkward at the thought of female toiletries. "Thank you," she said, sparing him further explanation. "That was very thoughtful." The moment passed, and they settled into preparing dinner together. As they ate, Xavier told her about his trip to town, the latest news, funny stories about the eccentric shopkeeper, how the first snow was predicted within weeks. "I should be gone by then," Zara said automatically, then realized she had nowhere to go. Xavier studied her across the table. "Winter's harsh here. Roads get blocked for weeks. You should stay until spring at least." When she started to protest, he added, "For the baby's sake. After it's born and weather permits, I'll help you get wherever you want to go." Zara wanted to object on principle, to insist she wouldn't impose for so long, but practicality won out. She was alone, pregnant, and without resources. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "All right," she agreed. "Until spring. But I insist on working for my keep as soon as I'm able." Xavier nodded, accepting her terms. "The ranch could use a woman's touch," he admitted. "I'm not much for indoor comforts." That night, lying in Xavier's bed with the knowledge that she had sanctuary at least through winter, Zara allowed herself to truly hope for the first time since discovering her pregnancy. Her child would be born warm and safe. She had time to plan, to heal both body and spirit. And although she hardly knew him, she trusted Xavier James to keep his word. What she couldn't quite identify was the flutter in her chest whenever he entered a room, or the way her eyes seemed drawn to his hands as he worked. That was something she would need to guard against carefully. After all, she had already trusted a man once, only to be abandoned. Xavier's kindness was just that kindness, not interest. And she had her child to think of now. Still, as sleep claimed her, Zara's dreams were filled with blue eyes and gentle hands, and the strange sense that perhaps fate had led her to this twisted pine for a reason. As October gave way to November, Zara's body healed steadily. The bruises faded from angry purple to yellow, then disappeared entirely. Her ribs still ached when she moved too quickly, but the sharp pain had dulled to a manageable discomfort. Only a small scar near her temple remained as a visible reminder of her family's violence. The baby grew visibly larger, making Zara increasingly awkward in her movements, but filling her with wonder when she felt kicks and turns within her womb. She'd begun fashioning simple garments from the blue fabric Xavier had given her, a small gown, caps, and blankets for the child due in less than 3 months. True to her word, Zara insisted on contributing to the household. She took over cooking, mending Xavier's clothes, and keeping the cabin in order. Her presence gradually transformed the space. Dried wildflowers appeared in a tin can on the table, the beds were made with hospital corners, and the floors swept daily. She even convinced Xavier to move his books into a more organized system on shelves he built at her suggestion. Xavier, for his part, seemed bemused by the changes but never complained. He taught Zara about ranch life, how to collect eggs from the small chicken coop he maintained, which wild plants were edible, how to predict weather from the behavior of animals and clouds. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together during the day and sharing quiet evenings by the fire, reading or talking. It was during one such evening, as the first snow of the season dusted the ground outside, that Zara finally asked the question that had been on her mind since finding the wooden box. "The photograph in your room," she said carefully, setting aside her mending. "Was that your brother?" Xavier looked up from his book, surprise flickering across his face. For a moment, Zara thought she'd overstepped. "Yes," he said finally. "My younger brother, Ethan. He died at Cold Harbor in '64. "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "You must have been close." Xavier closed his book, his gaze distant. "We were. Only 15 months between us. People sometimes thought we were twins. He was the better of us, though. Kinder. Funnier." A sad smile touched his lips. "He wasn't supposed to be there at all. Too young to enlist, but he followed me after Gettysburg. Said if I was going to get myself killed, he'd be there to stop it. Instead, you lost him," Zara said gently. Xavier nodded, his jaw tight. "I was a scout by then, away from the main lines. Didn't even know he was there until it was over. By the time I found him." He trailed off, the memory clearly still painful even 14 years later. "Is that why you came west?" Zara asked. "To get away from the memories?" "Partly," Xavier admitted. "After the war, I couldn't settle back into Virginia life. Everything reminded me of Ethan, of the person I was before. Our parents had died while we were fighting influenza, so there was nothing keeping me there." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "I understand something of what you're going through, Zara. Losing your family, even if the circumstances are different. Having to start over with nothing but what you carry inside you." The compassion in his voice nearly undid her. Zara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "At least you had something worth mourning," she said. "My father and brothers showed their true nature in the end. Not all family is bound by blood," Xavier said quietly. "Sometimes we find our people along the way." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. After a moment, Xavier stood and moved to the window, looking out at the thickening snow. "Storms picking up," he observed, changing the subject. "Might be the first big one of the season." Zara welcomed the shift to safer ground. "Will the cattle be all right?" "They're in the sheltered valley to the south," Xavier explained. "And they're a hardy breed. Been wintering here for generations before white settlers arrived." The conversation turned to practical matters, preparations for winter, supplies they might need, plans for the baby's arrival. But something had shifted between them. A door had been opened, revealing glimpses of pain they both carried, and perhaps the possibility of healing together. The storm intensified overnight, and by morning nearly a foot of snow blanketed the land around Twisted Pine Ranch. Xavier rose before dawn to check on the animals, returning with fresh milk from the cow and eggs still warm from the henhouse. "It's beautiful out there," he reported as he stamped snow from his boots. "Cold as the devil's heart, but beautiful." Zara had breakfast waiting: biscuits, eggs, and coffee. As they ate, she noticed Xavier watching her with an odd expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking you look better. Healthier. There's color in your cheeks now." Zara felt herself blushing. "I feel stronger," she admitted, "though I'm certainly getting more ungainly by the day." She placed a hand on her prominently rounded belly. "You look," Xavier started, then seemed to reconsider his words. "Well, motherhood becomes you." The compliment, unexpected and sincere, warmed Zara more than the fire crackling in the hearth. She murmured her thanks and busied herself clearing the dishes to hide her pleasure. "I need to check fence lines and make sure no cattle have strayed," Xavier said, pulling on his heavy coat. "Might be gone most of the day." Zara nodded. "I'll have something hot waiting when you return." After he left, Zara went about her now familiar routine of household chores. As she worked, she found herself reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed in just a month. From the desperate flight from Hawthorne to this domestic tranquility, from fearing for her life to planning for her child's future. And at the center of this transformation was Xavier James, a man who had asked nothing of her, but had given so much. She was startled from her thoughts by a sharp pain in her abdomen. Zara froze, one hand pressed against the kitchen table, the other cradling her belly. The pain subsided after a moment, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Just practice contractions, she told herself. The midwife in Hawthorne had told her to expect them in the final months. Still, the sensation left her uneasy. The baby wasn't due until late January or early February, still many weeks away. Zara resolved to rest more that day, taking to the rocking chair Xavier had dragged out of a storage shed for her use. She worked on baby clothes, pausing occasionally to massage her lower back when it ached. Outside, the snow continued to fall steadily. By mid-afternoon, Zara began to worry about Xavier. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and visibility must be poor. She found herself going to the window repeatedly, squinting into the white expanse for any sign of his return. When another sharp pain gripped her, stronger than before, real fear began to set in. It was too early. She wasn't ready. And Xavier wasn't here. Zara paced the cabin, trying to remember everything she'd heard about childbirth. False labor was common, especially for first-time mothers. But if it was real, in this weather, with no help, the sound of the door opening sent relief flooding through her. Xavier stepped inside in a swirl of snow, his coat and hat white with accumulation. Xavier. Zara couldn't keep the emotion from her voice. He looked up sharply, instantly alert to her distress. What is it? What's wrong? I think. Zara began, then gasped as another pain seized her. I think the baby might be coming. Xavier was across the room in 3 long strides, helping her to a chair. Are you sure? It's early. I don't know, Zara admitted, breathing through the fading contraction. I've been having pains, but they're not very close together. Xavier knelt before her, his expression serious but calm. How long between them? Maybe half an hour? They started this morning. He nodded thoughtfully. My mother always said first babies take their time. Could be false labor or just early warnings. His steady gaze met hers. Either way, I'm not leaving you alone again until we're sure. The cattle, Zara began, can survive without me checking every fence post, Xavier finished firmly. You and the little one can't. His certainty calmed her. What should we do? First, you rest, Xavier said, helping her to the bed. I'll heat water and gather clean linens, just in case. But try not to worry. Babies come when they're ready, and not before. As evening fell, Zara's pain subsided rather than intensifying. By nightfall, they had stopped altogether, leaving her relieved but slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry for alarming you, she said as Xavier brought her a cup of tea. It seems it was false labor after all. Xavier shook his head. No need to apologize. Better to be prepared too early than caught unaware. He sat beside the bed, his expression thoughtful. But this is a reminder that we need a plan. The baby will come eventually, and we need to be ready. What do you suggest? Zara asked, sipping the sweet tea gratefully. There's a Washoe woman, Luyu, who lives with her family about 3 miles from here, Xavier explained. She's a skilled midwife, helped half the children in these parts into the world, including some from white families progressive enough to trust her overriding days for a doctor. Do you think she would help me? Zara asked hesitantly. Xavier nodded. I'm certain of it. She's a friend. I've traded fairly with her family for years, and she owes me a favor after I helped her son with a broken leg last spring. Relief washed over Zara. The prospect of facing childbirth alone had terrified her more than she'd admitted. When can we ask her? As soon as the storm passes, Xavier promised. Probably day after tomorrow. In the meantime, we'll prepare everything here, just in case. That night, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Zara found herself contemplating how completely she had come to depend on this man who had been a stranger just weeks ago. It should have made her uncomfortable, this dependency, yet with Xavier it felt natural, right? He never made her feel like a burden or obligation. Instead, he treated her as a partner, someone whose opinions mattered. The realization brought another, more troubling thought. She was developing feelings for Xavier James that went well beyond gratitude. Feelings that complicated their arrangement and endangered the sanctuary she had found. Zara placed a hand on her belly, feeling her child move within her. I can't risk it, she whispered to the unborn baby. We need this place, this safety. I won't jeopardize that with foolish emotions. Yet, even as she made this resolution, Zara knew her heart was already treading a dangerous path. And judging by the way Xavier sometimes looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice, perhaps she wasn't walking that path alone. The storm finally broke 2 days later, leaving the landscape transformed under a pristine blanket of white. Xavier set out early to visit Luyu, promising to return by nightfall. Zara spent the day preparing the cabin, setting aside clean linens, and boiling and sterilizing the few instruments they had that might be needed for the birth. Her mind kept returning to Xavier's revelation about his brother. It explained much about him, his self-sufficient nature, the sadness that sometimes shadowed his eyes, his understanding of loss and new beginnings. It also made her see her own situation more clearly. Her family's rejection, painful as it was, had led her to a place where she might build something better, something true. Xavier returned as the early winter darkness was falling, accompanied by a small, straight-backed woman with gray-streaked black hair and keen dark eyes. Luyu's weathered face was inscrutable as she studied Zara, but her voice was kind when she spoke. Xavier says you need help with baby coming, she said in accented but clear English. I help. Have brought medicine. She patted a deerskin bag at her side. Thank you for coming, Zara said sincerely, feeling an immediate trust in this composed woman. Luyu nodded, then turned to Xavier. Now you go? Women talk. Xavier looked surprised. Go where? This is my home. Luyu made a shooing motion with her hands. Go check animals. Chop wood. Man things. 1 hour. To Zara's amusement, the usually self-assured Xavier obeyed without further protest, grabbing his coat with a bemused expression. When the door closed behind him, Luyu turned back to Zara. Now we talk truth, she said firmly. When baby come? Late January, I think, Zara replied. Though I had some pains during the storm. Luyu nodded. Practice pains. Normal. She gestured to Zara's belly. May I? At Zara's nod, the older woman placed her hands on Zara's abdomen, feeling with expert fingers. Strong baby, she pronounced. Good position. You eat well. As well as we can, Zara confirmed. Good. Xavier hunts good meat. I bring herbs for strength. Luyu began unpacking items from her bag, small bundles of dried plants, a stone pestle and mortar, a jar of honey. Make tea with these every day. Good for mother, good for baby. For the next hour, Luyu instructed Zara in preparations for childbirth, signs to watch for, and traditional remedies for various discomforts of late pregnancy. Her matter-of-fact approach was reassuring, making the prospect of labor seem less terrifying and more a natural process that women have been managing since time began. You afraid? Luyu asked directly as she repacked her supplies. Zara considered denying it, then decided honesty was better. Yes, I'm alone, far from home. Luyu's dark eyes were penetrating. Not alone. Have Xavier. Have me now. She paused, studying Zara's face. Xavier, good man. Honorable. Heart wounded but still strong. I know, Zara said softly. He cares for you. Luyu continued. Not just charity. See how he looks at you. Zara felt heat rising in her cheeks. I'm carrying another man's child. Luyu shrugged. Baby innocent. Father gone. New life needs new start. She tied her bag closed with deliberate motions. Think on it. Before Zara could respond, the door opened and Xavier entered, bringing a gust of cold air with him. Is it safe to return? He asked with a hint of humor. Yes, Luyu said, rising. Woman prepared now. I come back in 3 weeks to check. Sooner if baby decides to hurry. Xavier nodded. Thank you, Luyu. I'll take you home. No need. The older woman said firmly. Brought my horse. No path well. She turned to Zara. Remember tea. Every day. After Luyu left, an awkward silence fell between Zara and Xavier. Finally, he asked, did she help answer your questions? Zara nodded. She was very informative. And kind. Good. Xavier seemed relieved. The Washoe know these mountains and their healing properties better than any doctor with fancy Eastern schooling. She said you were a good man. Zara said without quite meaning to. That you had an honorable heart. Xavier looked away, but not before Zara caught a flush rising on his cheekbones. Luyu gives too much credit. I don't think so, Zara said quietly. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. For a moment, Zara thought Xavier might say something important, something that would shift the careful balance they had maintained. Instead, he cleared his throat and moved toward the stove. "You must be hungry," he said. "I'll make us some dinner." The opportunity passed, and Zara told herself it was for the best. Yet as she watched Xavier's capable hands preparing their meal, she couldn't help wondering what might have happened if she'd been brave enough to take one step closer, to acknowledge the growing feelings between them. But she was still carrying another man's child, still dependent on Xavier's charity. And he was still haunted by ghosts of his own. Perhaps the timing wasn't right. Perhaps it never would be. Yet Lu Yu's words echoed in her mind. New life needs new start. Maybe, just maybe, that applied to more than just her baby. The weeks leading up to Christmas brought a comfortable routine to Twisted Pine Ranch. Xavier took advantage of breaks in the weather to hunt, bringing home deer and rabbits that Zara preserved to last through the winter. They worked together to repair Xavier's spare room, transforming it into a nursery with a small crib he crafted from pine boards and a colorful quilt Lu Yu brought on her next visit. Zara's pregnancy progressed normally, according to Lu Yu's experienced assessment. The baby was active, especially at night, kicking so vigorously sometimes that Xavier could see the movement from across the room. He seemed fascinated by the process, asking questions about how it felt and listening with genuine interest to Zara's answers. As Christmas approached, Zara became aware of Xavier making mysterious trips to the storage shed, returning with sawdust clinging to his clothes, but refusing to explain what he was working on. "Just a project," he would say with a secretive smile that made her heart flutter embarrassingly. On Christmas Eve, they shared a special dinner of venison, preserved vegetables from Xavier's root cellar, and a small cake Zara had managed to bake with their precious stores of sugar and dried fruits. A pine bough decorated with ribbons salvaged from Zara's torn dress served as their Christmas tree, propped in the corner of the main room. "I have something for you," Xavier said as they sat by the fire after dinner. He rose and went to his coat, returning with a small package wrapped in clean muslin. "Xavier, you shouldn't have," Zara protested. "I don't have anything for you." He shook his head. "You've given plenty good food, a clean home, company during the long winter nights. This is a small thing." Zara unwrapped the bundle to find a beautifully carved wooden box with a hinged lid. The top was inlaid with a pattern of twisted pine trees, the workmanship exquisite. "Open it," Xavier encouraged. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a silver locket on a delicate chain. Zara gasped, lifting it carefully. "It's beautiful." "It was my mother's," Xavier explained. "I thought, for the baby, you could put a lock of hair inside when the time comes." A keepsake. Tears sprang to Zara's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it," Xavier said simply. "It should be used, not hidden away in my things." "Thank you," Zara whispered, clutching the locket to her chest. "I'll cherish it." Xavier's eyes were warm in the firelight. "There's one more thing," he said, rising again. "Wait here." He disappeared into the shed attached to the cabin, returning moments later with something large wrapped in a blanket. Setting it before Zara, he pulled away the covering to reveal a rocking cradle, perfectly sized for a newborn, made from polished pine with the same twisted tree motif carved into the headboard. "Xavier," Zara exclaimed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you make this?" "Been working on it for weeks," he admitted. "Wanted it to be a surprise." "It's perfect," Zara said, deeply moved. "Absolutely perfect." Acting on impulse, she rose awkwardly from her chair and embraced him. Xavier stiffened momentarily in surprise. Then his arms came around her, careful of her belly between them. Zara felt his cheek rest against her hair and closed her eyes, savoring the moment of connection. "Merry Christmas, Zara," he murmured. "Merry Christmas," she replied, reluctantly pulling away after a moment that lasted both too long and not nearly long enough. As they sat back down, Zara felt the air between them charged with unspoken words. She gathered her courage, deciding that if ever there was a time for honesty, Christmas Eve beside a warm fire was it. "Xavier," she began tentatively, "I need to tell you something." He looked up, expression open and attentive. "What is it?" "These past months. They've been the strangest of my life, but also in some ways the best," Zara said, choosing her words carefully. You saved me not just my life, but my spirit. You gave me safety when I had nowhere else to turn. And I, she faltered, suddenly afraid. And you? Xavier prompted gently. I've come to care for you, Zara admitted, her heart pounding. More than I should, perhaps, given our circumstances. I know my situation is complicated, and I would never presume that you might, Zara. Xavier interrupted softly, leaning forward. Look at me. She raised her eyes to his, finding them intent and serious. I've been alone a long time, he said. By choice, mostly. After Ethan died, after the war. I didn't want connections. They hurt too much when broken. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. Then I found you in the desert, and something changed. At first, I told myself it was just the right thing to do, helping someone in need. But it's become more than that. Hope blossomed in Zara's chest. What are you saying, Xavier? I'm saying I care for you too, he said simply. I admire your strength, your resilience. I enjoy your company more than I've enjoyed anyone's in years. And I find myself thinking of the future, not just mine, but yours and the baby's, and hoping they might be the same thing. Zara felt tears threatening again. Even though the child isn't yours? Xavier's expression grew tender. That child is innocent of its father's abandonment. And he hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. I would be honored to help raise any child of yours, Zara, if you'll allow it. The tears spilled over then, running unchecked down Zara's cheeks. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Not yet, Xavier said honestly. It's too soon for that. You're still healing in more ways than one. The baby will come, and that will change everything again. But I'm asking if you might consider a future here, with me, when you're ready. It was the perfect answer, respectful of her situation, mindful of the changes ahead, yet clear in its intentions. Zara squeezed his hand, unable to speak for a moment. I would like that very much, she finally managed. To see where this leads us. Xavier's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Zara responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his cheek. The kiss remained soft, a promise rather than a demand, and when they parted, both were smiling. Merry Christmas indeed, Xavier murmured, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the world in quiet white. Inside, before the crackling fire, Zara felt warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the flames. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was looking forward to the future rather than dreading it. January arrived with bitter cold and frequent snow. Xavier kept the paths to the barn and chicken coop cleared, but venturing much farther became difficult and dangerous. They settled into a winter rhythm, Xavier caring for the animals and maintaining their firewood supply, while Zara prepared for the baby's imminent arrival. True to her word, Liu visited every few weeks, checking Zara's progress and bringing herbs and advice. On her January visit, she pronounced that the baby would come when snow melts from twisted pine, a prediction that Xavier translated to mean late January, as the sun's changing angle would first clear the snow from the distinctive tree near the cabin. In the evenings, Xavier and Zara's relationship deepened. They spoke of their past, Xavier of his Virginia childhood and the horrors he'd witnessed during the war, Zara of her strict upbringing and her brief, fateful romance with a charming traveler named Thomas who had promised to return for her, but never did. They shared dreams too, Xavier's plans to expand the ranch, perhaps build a larger house eventually. Zara's hope to provide her child with the love and acceptance she had never fully received. They were careful with physical affection, limiting themselves to hand-holding, brief kisses, and the occasional embrace. Both understood that Zara's condition and their still new feelings demanded patience. There would be time enough for more after the baby came, after they were more certain of the path ahead. The morning of January 28th dawned clear and cold. Xavier went out at first light to tend to the animals, returning to find Zara standing by the window, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other supporting her enormous belly. Everything all right? He asked, hanging his coat by the door. Zara turned to him with a mix of excitement and apprehension in her eyes. I think today might be the day. I've been having pains since before dawn, and they're getting stronger. Xavier's heart leapt into his throat, but he kept his expression calm. Are you sure? No false alarm this time. Pretty sure, Zara confirmed, wincing as another contraction began. These feel different. More purposeful. Xavier moved quickly, stoking the fire to warm the cabin and putting water on to boil. I'll go for Luyu right away. There's time, Zara assured him. First babies are slow, remember? The pains are still quite far apart. Despite her reassurance, Xavier hurried through his preparations, saddling his horse and making sure Zara was as comfortable as possible before departing. I'll be back as soon as I can, he promised. An hour at most. The ride to Luyu's settlement seemed interminable, though in reality it took less than 30 minutes at the pace Xavier set. The Washoe woman was ready almost immediately, as if she had been expecting the summons. Together they rode back to Twisted Pine Ranch, arriving to find Zara pacing the cabin, pausing occasionally to breathe through contractions. Good, Luyu nodded approvingly. Walking helps baby come. Now men leave. Leave? Xavier repeated, confused. But, go to barn, Luyu directed firmly. Come when I call. Birth women's business. Xavier looked to Zara, who gave him a strained smile. It's all right, she assured him. I'll be fine with Luyu. Reluctantly, Xavier retreated to the barn, feeling utterly useless as the hours passed. He busied himself with unnecessary tasks, reorganizing tools, mending tack that didn't need mending, checking on the pregnant cow that wasn't due for weeks yet. Occasionally, he would step outside, looking toward the cabin as if he might somehow see through the walls to what was happening within. The winter sun was already lowering toward the mountains when the cabin door finally opened. Luyu appeared, beckoning him with a wave. Xavier crossed the distance in long strides, his heart pounding. Baby come, Luyu announced with a satisfied nod. Strong boy. Mother good. Relief flooded Xavier like a physical force. They're both well. Yes. Go see. Quiet now. Xavier entered the cabin with an unaccustomed reverence. The room was warm and dimly lit, smelling of medicinal herbs and something indefinably new. Zara was in the bed, propped up on pillows, her face tired but radiant. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in the blue blanket she had sewn. Xavier, she said softly, her voice full of wonder. Come meet him. Moving carefully, as if the floor might shatter beneath him, Xavier approached the bed. Zara turned the bundle slightly, revealing a tiny face with flushed cheeks and a shock of dark hair. He's perfect, Xavier breathed, overwhelmed by the smallness and completeness of the infant. Just perfect. Would you like to hold him? Zara asked. Xavier hesitated. I don't want to hurt him. You won't, Zara assured him. Here, sit beside me. With careful instruction, she transferred the newborn to Xavier's arms. The baby squirmed slightly, then settled, one miniature hand escaping the blanket to curl reflexively around Xavier's finger. The simple gesture sent a surge of emotion through him so powerful that he found his vision blurring with unshed tears. What will you name him? Xavier asked, his voice rough. Zara's eyes met his, full of meaning. I was thinking Ethan, she said quietly. Ethan James Hart. If that would be all right with you. Xavier couldn't speak for a moment, too moved by the gesture. Finally, he managed. It would be an honor. But, James. Well, Zara said with a small smile. I thought he should have something of the man who saved us both. And perhaps someday it might be his name in truth, not just in spirit. The implication was clear, and Xavier felt his heart expand with a joy he had nearly forgotten was possible. Zara Hart, he said, carefully transferring little Ethan back to his mother's arms. Are you asking me to marry you? Zara's laugh was tired but genuine. I suppose I am. Terribly forward of me, isn't it? Terribly, Xavier agreed, his smile threatening to split his face. And my answer is yes. Whenever you're ready. Soon, Zara said decisively. Very soon. We've already been through more together than most couples face in years of marriage. From the corner where she had been quietly preparing herbs, Liu made a satisfied sound. Good match, she pronounced. Strong family now. As evening deepened into night, Liu eventually departed, promising to return in a few days to check on mother and child. Xavier made up a bed for himself near the fire, insisting that Zara and Ethan needed rest more than he needed company. But as he lay awake, listening to the occasional soft sounds from the newborn, Xavier found himself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had led to this moment. From the battlefields of Virginia to the Nevada desert, from solitude to the prospect of family. From finding a beaten, pregnant woman in the dust to finding a future he had never dared hope for. He thought of his brother, the original Ethan, and felt a certainty that he would have approved of his namesake and the brave woman who had borne him. Perhaps this was what his mother's rescuer had meant about passing on kindness, not just a single act of mercy, but the rippling effect it could have, creating new possibilities, new lives, new love where before there had been only pain. Outside, the twisted pine stood sentinel in the moonlight, the snow indeed melting from its branches just as Lu Yu had predicted. Inside, Xavier James closed his eyes, allowing sleep to come at last, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together, he, Zara, and little Ethan, an unlikely family forged in hardship but bound by choice and love. Spring came to Nevada with a riot of wildflowers and the birth of new calves for Xavier's small herd. Zara and Ethan thrived, the baby growing plump and strong on his mother's milk, developing a personality that combined Zara's quiet determination with an infectious laugh that could coax a smile from Xavier even after the longest, hardest days of ranch work. They were married on a clear April morning, with Lu Yu and her family as witnesses along with a few of Xavier's trading partners and a traveling preacher who was persuaded to detour to Twisted Pine Ranch. Zara wore a simple dress of pale blue calico that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair and 3-month-old Ethan in her arms. Xavier, clean-shaven for the occasion and wearing his best shirt, couldn't take his eyes off them as he spoke his vows. "Never thought I'd see Xavier James tamed," remarked one old-timer to another as they enjoyed the wedding feast afterward. "But that woman and that baby, they've worked a miracle on him." It wasn't just Xavier who had been transformed, though. Zara, too, had changed from the beaten, desperate girl he'd found in the desert. She moved with confidence now, secure in her role as mother, wife, and partner in their growing ranch. The shadows of her family's rejection still surfaced occasionally on Sundays when church bells rang in the distance, or when news came from Hawthorne, but they no longer defined her. As spring progressed into summer, they began work on expanding the cabin. Xavier had been saving lumber for years, planning vaguely for a larger home someday, and now that someday had arrived. Together they designed a proper house with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen large enough for Zara to can and preserve the garden's bounty, and a covered porch where they could watch sunsets over the Nevada mountains. Ethan grew and thrived, rolling over at 4 months, sitting up at 6, and by 8 months attempting to crawl everywhere, much to his parents' amused exhaustion. His dark hair and eyes favored Zara, but his determined spirit seemed a blend of both his mother and the man who had chosen to be his father in every way that mattered. One evening in late September, as they sat on the half-finished porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Xavier reached for Zara's hand. "Happy?" he asked simply. Zara's smile was answer enough, but she spoke anyway. "More than I ever thought possible." "You?" Xavier nodded, his gaze moving from his wife to his son, who was sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby, to the land stretching before them, land that was no longer just a place of exile, but a true home. "I've been thinking," he said after a comfortable silence, "about expanding the herd next spring. The south pasture could support another 30 head, easily, and maybe adding some horses, good stock that we could breed and sell." "I like that idea," Zara agreed. "And maybe we could think about expanding something else too." Xavier turned to her, one eyebrow raised in question. "Our family," Zara clarified, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Ethan might like a brother or sister, don't you think?" The joy that spread across Xavier's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Are you saying?" "Not yet," Zara laughed. "But I wouldn't mind trying, if you're agreeable." Xavier's kiss was answer enough, tender and full of promise. When they parted, both were smiling like fools. "I love you, Xavier James," Zara said softly, resting her head against his shoulder. "For finding me, for saving me, for choosing me and Ethan." "And I love you, Zara James," Xavier replied, his arm tightening around her. for giving me a reason to build rather than just exist, for making this place a home. As darkness fell, they gathered sleeping Ethan and moved inside. The cabin soon to be replaced by their new house had never felt so full of possibility, so rich with the promise of tomorrows stretching into a shared future neither had dared imagine a year before. And outside, the twisted pine stood as it always had, bent but unbroken by the forces that had shaped it, stronger perhaps for having weathered storms and found its unique way to grow toward the sky. 5 years later, Twisted Pine Ranch had grown almost beyond recognition. The main house stood proud and welcoming, with glass windows that Xavier had transported all the way from San Francisco at considerable expense. A proper barn housed their expanded herd during the worst winter weather, and a corral held the half-dozen quality horses that were becoming known throughout the territory for their intelligence and endurance. Inside the house, evidence of a thriving family life was everywhere. Ethan's books and toys, carefully preserved. Baby Sarah's cradle in the corner of the main room. The quilt Zara had made during her second pregnancy spread across their bed. Family meals served on proper dishes at a table Xavier had crafted from local pine. The scars of the past hadn't vanished completely. Zara still occasionally woke from nightmares of that terrible day in Hawthorne, and Xavier sometimes grew quiet on the anniversaries of battles long past. But these moments grew rarer as time laid new memories over old wounds. They had their challenges, of course. The winter of '82 had been brutal, with snow so deep it nearly buried the fences and temperatures that froze the creek solid for weeks. They'd lost cattle despite their best efforts, and Xavier had developed a persistent cough that worried Zara until spring finally arrived to thaw the land and his lungs. There had been a drought the following summer, necessitating long days of hauling water to keep their garden and stock alive. And little Sarah had given them several terrifying nights with a high fever before Luyu's remedies finally broke it. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, partners in the truest sense, their bond strengthened rather than weakened by adversity. On a warm day in early June of 1884, as Zara sat on the porch shelling peas with 6-year-old Ethan helping, while baby Sarah napped inside, she spotted a cloud of dust on the road that led to their ranch. Visitors were more common now that Twisted Pine had become a successful operation, but something about this approaching rider made her set aside her work and call for Xavier. He emerged from the barn, saw the rider, and moved to stand beside Zara, one hand resting protectively on Ethan's shoulder. They watched together as the stranger approached, a well-dressed man on an expensive horse, clearly not from these parts. "Stay with your mother, Ethan," Xavier said quietly as the rider drew up to their fence. The man dismounted with the awkward movements of someone not accustomed to riding long distances. He removed his hat, revealing thinning brown hair and a face that sent a shock of recognition through Zara. It was older, more lined, but unmistakable. "Thomas," she whispered, her hand finding Xavier's instinctively. Xavier's body tensed, but his voice remained steady as he called, "Can we help you, stranger?" The man approached the gate cautiously. "I'm looking for Zara Hart," he said, his eyes moving from Xavier to Zara with growing certainty. "I believe I've found her." "The name is James now," Xavier said, his tone neutral but firm. "Has been for years." Thomas nodded, a flash of something disappointment? Resignation? Crossing his features. "I see. Mrs. James, then. Might I have a word?" Zara felt frozen in place, the past and present colliding in a way she'd never anticipated. This was the man who had charmed her with promises of a future together, who had left her carrying his child, who had indirectly been the cause of her family's violence and her near death. Yet looking at him now, she felt nothing. No anger, no longing, not even much resentment. He was simply a stranger whose actions had set in motion events that, painful as they were, had led her to where she stood now with a husband she adored, a son who was thriving, a daughter who was the light of their lives, and a home built on mutual respect and genuine love. "Anything you have to say to my wife can be said in front of me," Xavier stated, his hand warm and steady in hers. Thomas hesitated, then nodded again. "Fair enough, Zara. Mrs. James, I've come to make amends. I promised to return for you, and I failed to keep that promise. I have no excuse worthy of offering. Only an apology that comes too late. I see. Why now? Zara asked, finding her voice at last. After all this time? I've been trying to locate you for nearly a year, Thomas admitted. When I finally returned to Hawthorne, I was told you had run off with a salesman. It didn't sound right, knowing you as I did, however briefly. I started asking questions, and eventually a young woman, your sister, I think told me the truth in confidence. Zara's heart skipped a beat. My sister, Rebecca, Thomas confirmed. She said your father had cast you out, that there had been violence. She feared you had died alone somewhere. I've been searching ever since, following rumors and half-truths until they led me here. Ethan, who had been listening with the intense concentration of a curious child, tugged at Zara's skirt. Mama, who is this man? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Zara looked down at her son Xavier's son in every way that mattered and made a swift decision. This is Mr. Thomas Warren, she said calmly. An acquaintance from Hawthorne, where Mama lived before she met Papa. The simplified truth seemed to satisfy Ethan, who nodded seriously. Is he staying for supper? The innocence of the question broke the tension. Xavier's lips twitched toward a smile, and even Thomas looked momentarily disarmed. I don't think so, son, Xavier answered. Mr. Warren probably has a long ride back to town. Thomas cleared his throat. Actually, there's something else. I've brought news of your family, Zara. Your father passed away last winter. Zara absorbed this information with a complicated mix of emotions. The man who had raised her, who had then beaten her and cast her out, was gone. She had long since accepted that she would never receive his forgiveness or blessing, but the finality of death still felt like the closing of a door that had been left slightly ajar in her mind. And my brothers? My sisters? She asked. Joseph runs the farm now. Matthew left for California 2 years ago. Your sisters Rebecca and Mary still live in Hawthorne. Rebecca asked me to give you this, if I found you. Thomas reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded letter. Zara accepted it with slightly trembling fingers. Thank you. An awkward silence fell. Thomas shifted his weight, glancing at Ethan with undisguised curiosity. He looks well, he finally said. Strong. He is, Xavier confirmed, his voice leaving no room for any claim or connection. Our son is a fine boy. The emphasis was subtle but unmistakable. Thomas nodded, accepting the boundary drawn. I should go, he said, replacing his hat. I've delivered the news and the letter as promised. I'm glad to see you well, Zara. More than well. His gaze took in the prosperous ranch, the solid house, the family standing together. It seems life has been kinder to you than I was. It has, Zara agreed simply. Without further farewells, Thomas mounted his horse and rode away. They watched until the dust cloud faded into the distance. Then Xavier turned to Zara. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Zara looked down at the letter in her hand, then up at her husband's concerned face. Yes, she said, and meant it. That was not something I ever expected, but I'm fine. What's in the letter? Ethan asked, always practical. I don't know yet, Zara told him, ruffling his dark hair. But I think it might be nice to hear from your Aunt Rebecca after all this time. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Zara finally opened Rebecca's letter by the light of the bedroom lamp. Xavier sat beside her, a silent source of strength as she read her younger sister's careful handwriting. The letter was full of news, apologies, and tentative hopes for reconnection. Rebecca wrote of her shame at not defending Zara, of how she had married a kind storekeeper the previous year, of how she had never stopped wondering about her sister and the child she had carried. She asked if perhaps, someday, they might meet again, not in Hawthorne, where memories were too painful, but somewhere neutral. What do you think? Zara asked Xavier when she finished reading, passing him the letter. He read it thoughtfully before answering. She sounds sincere. And unlike your father and older brothers, she was young when it happened. Perhaps not able to stand against them even if she wanted to. That's true, Zara acknowledged. She was only 16. Do you want to see her? Xavier asked, always getting to the heart of the matter. Zara considered the question carefully. I think. Yes. Not right away. But perhaps when Sarah is a bit older, we could make a trip to Carson City. Meet on neutral ground, as she suggested. Xavier nodded. We'll plan for it, then. Next spring, maybe. They prepared for bed in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they lay together in the darkness, Zara curled against Xavier's side. She found herself reflecting on the day's unexpected encounter and what it had revealed to her. "I felt nothing for him," she admitted quietly. "Thomas, I mean. Seeing him again. It was like meeting a stranger who happened to look familiar." Xavier's arm tightened around her. "That bothers you?" "No," Zara said thoughtfully. "It's just, I thought I loved him once. I was so certain. But now I know what real love is, and what I felt for Thomas wasn't even a pale shadow of what I feel for you." Xavier pressed a kiss to her temple. "Real love grows stronger with hardship," he said. "What we've built together, this ranch, our family, our life, it's founded on something true." "Yes," Zara agreed, thinking of all they had weathered together. "Exactly that." As sleep began to claim her, Zara found herself profoundly grateful for the strange, painful path that had led her here. Had her father not cast her out, had her brothers not beaten her, had she not fled into the desert that fateful day, she would never have known this deep contentment, this genuine partnership, this love that sustained rather than consumed. And Ethan, her beautiful firstborn who called Xavier Papa with complete trust and adoration, would never have known the patient guidance and unconditional love that was shaping him into a kind, thoughtful boy. Sarah would not exist at all. Some might call it mere chance, Xavier riding that particular trail on that particular day, finding her before it was too late. But Zara preferred to think of it as something more purposeful, a twisted path that, like the pine that gave their ranch its name, had been shaped by harsh forces into something uniquely beautiful and enduring. "I love you," she whispered to Xavier, but he was already asleep, his breathing deep and even beside her. Outside, under a sky full of stars, Twisted Pine Ranch lay peaceful in the Nevada night. The house Xavier had built with his own hands stood strong against the occasional desert wind. The barn sheltered their livelihood. The garden Zara had painstakingly cultivated was beginning to yield its summer bounty. And within those walls slept two children who would grow up knowing only security, acceptance, and love. It was a life neither Zara nor Xavier could have imagined for themselves 6 years earlier, she, the disgraced preacher's daughter, carrying an unwanted child. He, the solitary former soldier haunted by war and loss. Yet somehow, out of those broken pieces, they had built something whole and beautiful. Zara closed her eyes, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future might bring, reunions with estranged sisters, new challenges on the ranch, the joys and sorrows that were part of any life fully lived, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything since that fateful day when a battered, pregnant girl and a lonely cowboy had found in each other exactly what they needed most. Not just rescue, but redemption, renewal, and a love strong enough to heal the deepest wounds.